Hey, this is Madeline Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. So, where should we start? What's our first story, Madeline?
You know, host Celine Main is always so great at catching little things that maybe the rest of us are not paying close attention to. And he was kind of like questioning, like, hey, are new emojis coming soon to Spaces? Because it was actually the mouthwash space that you guys host, that you work with Paul on, and that he noticed how Danny Singh from Twitter was using a clap emoji during the space. I wasn't there, so I mean, I'm sure you could really enlighten us on this. But this looks really interesting. That looks like more emojis are coming.
Yeah, absolutely, and it really was like eagle-eyed host Celine. He was there. Like Danny used this.
Eagle-eyed.
Yeah, I mean,
definitely.
Danny used this emoji during one of the Mouthwash spaces. Mouthwash is a podcast that is recorded live on Twitter Spaces, just like All Things Audio, and kind of goes in seasons. So Paul, the host there, does kind of daily interviews with people for a kind of over a month, and then goes off and plans the next lot for a few months and then comes back. But yeah, so this was in the Mouthwash space, and Paul was actually interviewing Danny about spaces and about better open innovation was kind of the title of the space for the evening. But as we were talking, obviously people were using emojis and things, and host Celine must have been watching very closely because Danny used an emoji in the space that actually isn't an emoji that's one of the main 5. So, and we've discussed this before around, it's quite a limiting set of emojis that we've got, but I can kind of understand why they're limited. And Twitter have actually said themselves, they don't really want any negativity coming from the emojis. So, there's a reason why there's not a thumbs down or any of the kind of more characterful, shall we say, emojis that might be used. I've put it out there that perhaps hosts should be able to choose their own 5. I still think that might be a nice feature. But host Celine spotted this, and it was a round of applause emoji that Danny used. And he did question him on it and said in that moment, like, okay, so how did you do that and when's that arriving? And Danny said it was due to be announced kind of pretty much the next day. Now, I'm not sure if it was announced. Host Celine put this tweet out and he'd seen it happening. And I mean, I've updated since then, and I've certainly not got it on mine. Have you got it on yours, Madeline?
No, I haven't. I mean, I love how he noticed it during the mouthwash space. And then in this tweet that I put in the nest, he's promoting the Twitter Spaces community update that was coming up. And I love how he kind of like new emojis coming soon, ? And used this screenshot to point out what he had seen and thinking that maybe they were going to announce it during that community update. But I wasn't able, I was there just very briefly, so I didn't catch, what them talking about that. So I wasn't even sure if, when that was going to happen.
I certainly haven't seen it. I've been in a few spaces this week and I haven't seen anybody else using it. So I think potentially it's one of those things that the product team have got access to, and it's clearly something that they've been talking about and is coming down the line, but potentially hasn't kind of reached us on the ground as yet. But yeah, I do think this round of applause emoji is coming. It's just kind of as and when. So I think with each update, we can all check in on the emojis and see if it's appeared. But yeah, certainly soon. I mean, the interview between Paul and Danny was quite interesting. There are a few things there that Danny was speaking about and ways that people were asking him about using spaces that I really hadn't completely thought about. One of them was whether or not they're intending to allow video to be pinned in the nest. Someone was asking about, we might want to have a watch party and we could use the nest to stream something that we could all sit and watch together. And I thought, oh, what an interesting idea. Like, I've been so keyed into this being audio only and just being audio that I hadn't really even considered that could be a feature or something that people would be thinking about. So it's really interesting to hear how other people see spaces and the features, beyond the hosts that we know and chat with quite regularly, Madeline. what other people are thinking of using it for. Yeah, it was very interesting space.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I love that they're coming up with more and more features. We just don't always know exactly when it's coming out. That particular space for mouthwash, is that available? Were y'all able to record that?
Yeah, so it's available over on Paul Armstrong's profile, because he's got recorded spaces, as you and I now have as well. So there is a native recording that is flying around the Twitterverse, but it is part of season 3 of Mouthwash, which will be up as a podcast before the end of the year, I believe. So yeah, watch out for it. He is Paul _Armstrong. And you can see all of the different things about mouthwash that are on there. Yeah, I mean, the other things that they spoke about in terms of those features that are coming up are things that, have definitely been spoken about before. So Danny was asked about the download feature for the audio. Obviously, I mean, it was days since the replay feature had been launched when this interview was happening. And Danny said, that download feature is definitely on their radar, but it's also not coming anytime soon. So in terms of us as hosts looking for a way to easily download our audio for repurposing and reusing on other platforms, that's not something that they're considering is going to happen kind of in the immediate future, but it's definitely on the roadmap. And the other thing is something that we were actually talking about with George last week, which is about scheduling multiple spaces. And Danny said that at the moment they're working with some really big companies like CNN and NBA. I think it was CNN that Andrew had showed us the video of last week, where he could see all of those different spaces scheduled, like 20 spaces scheduled into the future. It's a feature that they're allowing those big companies that they're partnering with and working with to use, but it's not something that they've rolled out as yet, but they are actively working on that happening. And I know that will be something that will, there'll be a collective sigh of relief in the Twitter Spaces hosting universe when we can actually schedule more than one space at a time. So really encouraging to hear the conversation and for them to kind of pick up on different things that we've also been talking about over here on All Things Audio for a few weeks now.
Yeah, and I want to mention, I just found the tweet from that mouthwash interview that Paul Armstrong did with Danny Singh. And this is what's so cool about this new replay feature. All you have to do is go find a tweet promoting, even if the room is already ended. Like, this is a tweet from last week where it says live happening now. Well, we know it's not happening now. This was from a week ago. But if you're on mobile, you should see at the purple card at the bottom of the tweet, it should say play recording. We know right now with the playback, it's not available on desktop. It was just iOS only, but my understanding as of now is iOS and Android. Do you know have you heard otherwise?
Oh, I haven't actually. No, I'd kind of thought that it had rolled out across the two. I know it's still not available on the desktop.
Right. So anybody on mobile should see at the bottom of this tweet in the nest, and we'll put in the show notes as well for the podcast version of this room, but it should say play recording, and then you could go and listen to this interview. But we also know that Paul records this as a podcast as well. So you're saying when this new season of the podcast version comes out, then that'll be available in your favorite podcast player. But for now, if you want to listen to it, and that's what I love about people like Paul, people like us that utilize spaces to record podcasts, is that now with this playback feature, this replay, you could go back and listen. You have 30 days from when that room happened to go back and listen. You just need the URL. So whether you're able to somehow get the URL or just see a tweet from the past. And I don't know if you've heard about this. There's this brand new feature now where you can search for tweets from a Twitter account. So like if I go to go to his Twitter. Now this is just mobile only though. It's not on desktop. But if I go tap on Paul Armstrong, you might not have noticed this yet for some of you listeners. At the top, very, very top, there's the little 3 dots where you have all these little things you can tap on and do. But next to it, you're now going to see a magnifying glass. And this is brand new. And when you tap on it, it'll say, like this is what it tells me when I tap on that. Search at Paul _Armstrong's tweets. So I I could do a quick search. Normally I'd use advanced search, but this is going to be a nice little shortcut. So I'm searching for Paul's tweets and I want to look up when he had Danny. So I'm just going to just type in Danny and see if something as simple as that. Yep. If you just type in Danny, the first thing that comes up under top tweets is, here's Mr. Danny Singh's Mouthwash Show recording. And there's the Twitter card, the purple Twitter card with the play recording on it. So this is now a fast, easy way. So let's say, now I have the ability to record my rooms and spaces. You do as well, Suze. So let's say someone listening right now is like, I would love to hear the playback from last week's show. For whatever reason, let's say like ours is a podcast, but we don't put it out. Like, we put ours out right away, but not everybody does. And so you don't want to wait. So that would be a way to do it, is use that new little search feature on someone's profile. So search just for their tweets and just type in whatever the right keywords you think would help you find that. Does that make sense? Like a very quick and easy way to go find something.
Definitely. It's this week's Madeline's Twitter tips moment. That's what I'm going to call that.
There's your ninja tweet tip for the day.
With all the puns intended there, with moments and all the rest of it. And one day when I'm able to play in fancy sounds and music and things, you'll have like a big drum roll and we'll do it as a feature and it'll be amazing. Because every week you come out with some Twitter gold for us, Madeline, whether it's related to spaces or not. And I absolutely love it. Yeah, what a fantastic tip that, you can go back into someone's profile and do that specific search through their timeline and find what it is that you want to listen to via spaces or a tweet that's specific to a certain topic from them. I think it's, that's great. Thank you so much for letting us all know about it. It's brilliant.
Absolutely. All right. So moving on, there is Twitter Spaces put out a tweet last week right after we hosted the room, because they always do. We've talked about this. Seems like clockwork. There's always some kind of an announcement from them as soon as you and I have hosted our room. And I found this to be quite interesting. The tweet says, have friends that are not on Twitter. That's weird. Yeah, we know that. We agree that is weird. But now you can share direct links to your spaces and they can listen via web without being logged in. So how cool is that you could share, when you're scheduling a room, or even if you're live, there is a URL attached to every single room in spaces. So you could share that link to someone anywhere, and they click on it and they don't have to be logged into Twitter and they can still listen. I think that's huge news.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely broadens out that audience base again, doesn't it? It takes Twitter Spaces to the masses. You don't have to have the Twitter account anymore. You can share it out, share that link out in your newsletter or whatever, and not worry about the fact that you're kind of limiting it to only people that log into Twitter regularly. I think it's great. And I think it's, again, testament to getting kind of more people into the platform. I'm sure they're thinking sort of on the ground about the fact that if there are exciting things going on in Twitter Spaces that people hear about and they haven't got a Twitter account, then maybe they might sign up. But still, I think it's great. It opens the doors again to more people being able to join in and to listen in. That's another great piece of news coming out of Spaces. Yeah. And we've spoken about tagging, haven't we, up until now as well, and the discoverability.
We have, yes, which is a great feature. I'm looking forward to when they really expand on it, but hey, at least this shows that they're really working to make discoverability easier. And I think incorporating the topics feature into this so that we can tag various topics is huge. And I love knowing now that they've rolled this out to a lot more languages instead of just English.
Yeah, that's right. So their news last week was that they were rolling out tagging, expanding the different languages that was going to be available in. So Japanese, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, Hindi, Turkish, Indonesian, Russian, Korean, and more languages coming soon. So again, it's a super feature. I think it has definitely helped in terms of being able to categorize what people are talking about. It definitely helps within that discoverability tab. I have to admit, it is limiting in terms of being a host and trying to set it up. Like, I've chosen 3 topics because that's the maximum. And I feel like, well, I don't want to just put 2. If I've got space for 3, then I'll I'll put a third one in there. But I have to admit, like out of the three that we've got, arts and culture, I'm not so sure. I mean, so the three that I've tagged for this particular space today are business and finance. Fair enough, kind of business, corporate maybe. Technology, yep, I think we definitely get a tick for that one. But arts and culture, culture, I guess this is a new cultural thing. I'm not sure what else we would put it under. I'd quite like to have a marketing tag, maybe. That was, kind of where I might feel a little bit more at home. That's how I tag the podcast. So potentially that is where I would put that topic tag on here as well. But definitely a great feature and good to see it being rolled out further afield.
Well, it's interesting that you're maximizing the 3. I feel like the 10 that they provide, they're so generic. When I'm hosting my rooms, I'm just doing the 2. I'm doing business and finance and technology because I feel like you're making a great point, and it's definitely making me rethink it. But I'm trying to keep it as narrow as possible because I don't want it to go too broad because I just feel like, but then again, maybe that's not a bad idea. So, you're giving me something to think about, Suze. I like that. And this is just always a great time for me to remind everybody that if you're not utilizing the Twitter Topics feature, start using it now because we now know that Twitter is incorporating this into Spaces and it's just going to get more and more improved on. So if you're like me and you're like picking all these different topics of things that interest you, number one, it makes your Twitter feed way better and more customized to the things you're interested in. But also it will help as Spaces keeps evolving with discoverability surrounding the topics feature. So I would definitely, take a few minutes, go into the topics. When you're on desktop, is on the side menu there. You got to click on more and then you'll see topics. And, same thing on desktop. You can just easily get to it just on the sidebar menu. You'll see topics there as well. So always a good time to bring that up when we see Spaces keeps working on expanding that.
Yeah, definitely. So the next thing we're going to talk about is actually, we touched on it earlier a little bit, the discrepancies between desktop and mobile in terms of experience for Spaces. There was a tweet that I spotted that Legion, who's another one of the Twitter Spaces hosts, had put out recently, kind of during the week, talking about how Spaces for desktop is kind of coming online slowly. They have, again, a roadmap for it. Currently, we can only listen to a space on desktop. This tweet kind of outlines that speaking in a space is going to be the next step and hosting a space via desktop will be that third step. I don't know how in line with the Twitter product team that timeline is. It seems quite kind of sensible and some common sense there that, we'd be able to sort of speak into the space and then be able to host it. It kind of adds on those different functions. I do think it would be great to be able to host via desktop for lots of reasons. I feel like that will start to give that flexibility, like I suggested earlier about playing in different elements, the kind of thing that kind of Clubhouse is allowing you to do at the moment, where you can connect those kind of third-party bits of hardware and things so you can play stuff in. I feel like that would start to open the door over here for that. But yeah, it's he says here, I can't tell you a proper time frame, but it's evolving very fast. And there are notable updates in the tweet that he sent out, which I'm sure you've popped up in the nest. So yeah, interesting to hear that still work being done on desktop. Not that we ever thought that they'd forgotten it. So that's good.
Yeah, it's good to know that this is something being worked on, and it'll be so great when we can start speaking in a space when we're on desktop. There's been so many times where I just pop into a room on desktop and then people, oh, Madeline's here. Madeline, request the mic. We want you to talk. And it's like, oh, shoot, now I got to go open up on mobile because I can't do it on desktop. So that'll be nice when that is available. And I agree 100% with you. It'll be even better when we can host from desktop. So we're waiting patiently.
And I mean, there's no easy way of letting that space know that you're on desktop and that you can't interact at that moment or anything like that. So, even if there was like an interim, dare I say, emoji that you could, I don't know, have a screen emoji.
That's what I was thinking. Like, give us an emoji to let signal that we, are on desktop and we can't speak right now. That would be great.
Yeah, because as you say, it does feel very rude when, people kind of call you out that you're in there. And usually, if you're there, you're normally requesting the mic or being involved in the conversation because we love being in Twitter Spaces. And you don't want it to seem random or like you're just ignoring them, but you're on the desktop. And as you say, it's not always it's not obvious to the others in the space at all, but it's not always easy to just kind of jump across and do the switch over. So yeah, that would be another thing that I'd like them to think about.
Definitely. And we have one final piece of news about Spaces. When we knew this was a very Spaces heavy day to talk about because there's just so much going on with Spaces. But pretty exciting that if you are hosting ticketed Spaces, they've come up with a little area in the dashboard where you can keep track of your earnings. And, they're showing in a screenshot here of the concept for this, but I'm able to access, I haven't done a ticketed space yet, even though I'm able to. When I'm on mobile and I go to my left sidebar menu, I tap on monetization and then I tap on ticketed spaces. There's under account, there's a dashboard and it shows earnings and orders. But since I haven't done anything, nothing's in there yet. So I'm curious to because it says concept only in parentheses and this tweet came out 20 hours ago. So it came out yesterday. So they're just showing us how they plan to have it look, even though we can't access. I can get into that section on my phone, but
I think once again, they're kind of putting it out to the community to see what our first thoughts are on the look of it and whether there's anything obviously missing, perhaps, that people might want to see there, whether it's clear enough for people. I think that's kind of the idea. As it says here, this is a concept. They're just kind of asking for feedback really on the design of it. So yeah, I don't have ticketed spaces, and to be honest, I haven't seen that many ticketed spaces around. So I think you're probably one of the few, Madeline, that has the access to it. But yeah, I think it's obviously still being worked on. So maybe that's why we're not seeing them pop up left, right, and centre. We were having a conversation at the beginning of setting up the space, actually before we started the podcast, where we were talking about the quality of the Twitter Spaces recording, Madeline. Now, you got the recording feature this week.
I finally got it late last week, finally got it. So my very first recorded room was... was it the Twitter Smarter one? I know I definitely recorded the Twitter Audits room on Saturday. But yeah, I now have it. So I can finally, record my rooms. And I did read that they're offering this first to the beta hosts. And since I was one of the early beta hosts, I figured that's why I finally got access to it. Because I don't know too many people that have it, but you have it and you were a beta host. So it seems like that's who they're starting with. And actually, I have an article coming out tomorrow talking about this new feature and how it's coming soon. But for now, it's being rolled out to beta hosts.
But I was interested to hear your take on the audio from it, because you're not particularly keen on it, are you?
No, I'm not. And I'm quite surprised because one of the things I love about Twitter Spaces is the quality of this audio. And we all agree, audio quality is great. Clubhouse audio did not start off great. They've improved on it. Really, kudos to them for doing that. I would have expected some decent quality for the playback of Spaces, but because the audio is not so great, I'm thinking maybe, and Hostling probably can enlighten us because he always knows everything about all this stuff, and always gets the insider information. But I'm assuming it's because if they're streaming this out to as many people that want to listen to the playback, I'm sure they have to be very aware of the amount of space for these files. And, we know that lower quality is lower file size. So I imagine it has something to do with all of that and all that techie, bit rates and all those things. You probably know more about that than me with how to best talk about all that technical stuff. But, the better the quality, the larger files are.
One of the conversations I've had recently around this is the fact that, a full WAV file, full quality of an hour-long recording will usually be kind of around 500, 600 megabytes. But you're looking at kilobytes if you're breaking down the quality to a streaming level. So, you know, and actually I'll try and post after this space, I'll try and post kind of the difference between like the transport space file size and the full quality wave file size. But yeah, I mean, we're talking hundreds of megabytes versus kilobytes, and that's very different. Like even someone who's not particularly techie, the difference in the number tells you a lot about what the amount of data that's being captured there. So yeah, I think you're right. They're obviously very aware that it needs to be a small file to play back and to live there on Spaces. You know, if they're going to have everybody that's got Spaces access being able to offer out replays of their Spaces after the event, then that's going to take up a certain amount of bandwidth. So they're obviously trying to limit that, minimize that as much as they can, and quality is going to be the key, which is why quality is going to kind of be the fall guy, if you see what I mean. But that's why I think it's so important that the quality of the content in these social audio spaces is so great, because people will listen if the content is there and the quality of the content is good. Then people can forgive to a certain extent, and certainly on social audio at the moment as it grows, people will forgive the audio quality.
For me personally, like since ours becomes a podcast, version of this room 2 days later, and I can definitely hear a big difference between listening to the playback streaming through Twitter after this room is over versus listening to the nice podcast version, because you and I are, in addition to doing this live in Spaces, we're also on our phones. We're recording this with our nice fancy podcast mics. You're doing the nice little pro editing, and, the quality really shines through. So it'll be interesting to see. Yeah.
But the other thing to remember, though, is that even when I'm recording, so when I record the full space and I do that into Adobe Audition via Soundflower, I record that as a WAV file. But obviously, it will only take in the quality that's being given out, and that is still a streaming quality file. I do that to kind of give me enough headroom and enough kind of to work with if I want to try and minimize background noise and all that kind of thing. But to be honest, it's a WAV file only in name. The quality of it is only what's going in, which is still a very small streaming type file. So it's tricky. Whether or not we'll ever get to a stage where we can get full quality separate channel audio files, I don't know. I don't know that any of the social audio platforms are offering anything like that at the moment. The amount of data that would take and the strain that would put on an app would be quite immense, I think. But, who knows? We never thought that we'd be talking to each other across the ocean once a week, Madeline, did we? So, and now we do it, and here it is. It happens.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, the technology just keeps constantly improving. But yeah, I mean, this is, it's all great news from Twitter Spaces this week. So much going on and really exciting. We only have one piece of news about Clubhouse that you tweeted about a few days ago. You want to talk about that?
It is the big news for Clubhouse. They have basically announced that the replays feature, where you can go back and replay the full experience of a Clubhouse room, is now going to be rolled out. So, and this is so much wider than I expected it to be. So when they say you can replay the room, they're not just talking about the audio of that room. They're talking about you being able to see those pinned links that we've been speaking about recently. Those links will still be live, so you can still click through them. There's also some dynamics within that replay file where you're able to skip to the next speaker. So you can be listening to someone that's talking and then think, oh no, I've had enough of listening to what you're saying now, and kind of skip along. So rather than kind of fast forwarding 10 seconds or, going back 30 seconds like you would do on a podcast player, this literally finds the next voice and then brings that up to the next speaker, the next part to listen to. The other thing is you can download the source file. So anyone that's created a room, the hosts of that room now has access to be able to download the source file, which, is exactly what we've just been talking about over here. And it also allows for a cumulative attendee count. So this basically tells the host not only who was live, listening, part of the audience while they were live in their room, but also adds up all those people that then come back and listen and experience that content afterwards, which obviously is going to push up those attendee numbers and make that content go so much further. A really interesting update. Lots and lots to unpack from it. And with the download, that they're even saying, room creators will have the ability to download the audio so they can edit it, use it wherever they want, as a podcast, clip on YouTube, Instagram story, TikTok video, or embed in their article or newsletter. So, they've definitely heard what social audio creators want, and they're doing their utmost to roll that out. So yeah, very exciting over on Clubhouse this week.
Yeah, I mean, that's some great news. I would definitely love if any of our listeners here have been, doing any of this. We'd love to hear from them. Here's, how it's working out for others, for sure. Hey, Tristan, thanks for joining us.
Hey there. We've been playing around doing some recordings and stuff over on Clubhouse for the different rooms, and just to get a figure out of how that works, and maybe even a little bit of inspiration from wisdom. That the recordings help show which clubs are active in a way. So we might do some little demo rooms or taster rooms, just record it for 10 minutes or something and leave that on the room, just as a way of sort of using those recordings in a different way, if you like.
Oh, so almost like a trailer. Yeah, that's a great idea. So kind of almost talking it up and then leaving it there for people to come across, but then bigging up your own room in a way. Yeah.
Because we didn't plan some of the rooms, sort of the mod in the clubs, we don't plan to record all the rooms, partly because a lot of them are social rooms, but it sort of gives a way of giving people an idea of what it's about.
Yeah, and in fact, I'd thought about doing that over here on Spaces using voice tweets. It's always time that gets the better of me, unfortunately. But I feel like with voice tweets, there's kind of a stepping stone, a point there where you could, promote the room, the space that you're about to do. But certainly, over on Clubhouse, if you're creating that tiny bit of content first, all in the same app and all in the same way, I think that's a really clever way of doing it. Yeah, very cool.
Been playing with another way of using the pinned messages in Clubhouse as a banner for showing, a bit like you might do cue cards for a speaker or a comedy act saying hurry up or pad for 5 more minutes or whatever, these sort of things. So made a little hack together a little page app sort of thing. It's obviously very basic because it's just using the meta tags to show a particular image and a particular bit of text, but then it can be quite quick to say, you've got 5 minutes, you've got 4 minutes, please wrap it up type thing. So using it as a banner. So we were just sort of playing around with these things as little features.
Sounds like you're being quite innovative over there and trying to really kind of work out new ways of using the different features that they're offering. So it sounds great. Hey there, Jason. How are you?
Hey, good. Thanks for letting me ask a question. I always learn lots here. To get people outside of Twitter to listen to your space, you know how it says other listeners? Is it just the link to the spaces that you use? I've put it on Facebook and Instagram. I don't know if other people are listening or if it's working though.
Yeah, it's just the link, the URL. So when we schedule this room, it gives us a URL, or when we're live here right now, you can click on the share button and it says copy link. And all you got to do is just share that link wherever to anyone, and they can click on that, and they don't have to be logged into Twitter. It'll go. I haven't tried it because I'm always logged into Twitter, but yeah, you can now listen without being logged in or even have an account.
So is that down at the bottom where it says, I don't know if you can see, Madeline, because I forget if it looks different for speakers or hosts. It says 0 other listeners. If there's 3 or 4 people, it says 3 other listeners. Are they from parts unknown? They could be from the link I shared?
Yeah, because it says when you tap on that, it says, there might be people listening who aren't logged into Twitter. And this has been on here for a while now. So I was figuring that's what they were starting to work on, was making this link shareable to the point that you don't have to be logged into Twitter to listen to a room. So that's my interpretation of that. But yeah, right now it says 0 other listeners. I've seen before in rooms where you see a number there. So I'm assuming those are people who click on the link and are listening without being logged into an account.
Okay, that's cool. That would help. Like, our Twitter account is obviously our biggest one, but we do have Instagram and Facebook stuff. So
yeah, and I did notice, actually, just a bit of an aside, but I noticed the other day that Instagram have launched like a link sticker that's available to everyone as well. I was trying that out the other day. So whether or not you could have the link and kind of use that in the link sticker and then divert people over here, that'd be quite interesting to test.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah.
So yeah, I might test that out this week and then report back next week.
Yeah, I would love to hear the results of that. It's a great idea.
Morgan, hey, I see you there in the space. What can you tell us about Clubhouse? Because I'm fairly sure you've been over there and I know that you're in the new surprise town hall that happened this week.
Yes, I mean, you can see me there in the replay now, which is very strange.
You cannot hide.
No. Well, actually, there is a way to hide, but I'll come on to that. That's kind of interesting. But yeah, no, there's a lot to think through here, and I haven't actually written about this yet. I was hoping to write something over the weekend, and there isn't even a Twitter thread that I can refer to. But so far, I mean, it looks pretty extensive. So the experience as the listener is very nice. The phrase they're using is live but later. So trying to recapture the feeling of being in a room. And I think they've done that to a large extent. So as you said, it basically stores all the metadata of every single interaction in that room, and then streams that back. So you see the room like reanimate with this stream of metadata events. So the technical implementation is really interesting. But the experience is great. One of the things that I like, which you mentioned, is the skip to the next speaker. I think that's so lovely as a kind of something that's specific to the medium that you maybe wouldn't see on podcasts, because we often have like more than a couple of people talking. And it's also really nice how they've done it. So what they do is they take the profile picture of the next speaker and they layer it into the button. So you're not just tapping a button, you're tapping on the face of the next person who's talking. So it's just little sort of thoughtful details that focus this around the people in the room. And I think that's obviously like really important for social audio, because it's about the people, it's about being together. The other part of that is not just seeing the speakers. You can see everyone else who came to the room, including everyone who came when it was live. And now there's a new section at the bottom. You can see everyone who came and listened to it afterwards as well. So, I mean, that captures the feeling, because a real part of it is, you know, you're often in the audience with friends and then you pop up and say something, or you're on stage and you're seeing the people who are friends who are listening. And now you get to, you know, you get the full experience of the room. So it's not just about who's on stage or who's speaking. It's about everyone else who came along too. And something I've experienced, which has been nice over the last few days, is often seeing people that I know who've listened to it, either live or as a replay, and being able to send them a message and say, hey, what did you make about that? Or, oh, I saw you did this thing last night. I'm really sorry I missed that, but it was amazing. So it's becoming a way to sort of take a space that has happened and continue to have conversation about it, which is really interesting.
So in a way, it extends the life of that conversation, doesn't it? It extends the life of that experience, because it means that the conversation can continue long after the actual live element of it is over. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and for somebody who's in the UK, I mean, the obvious thing is time zones. So I can now be part of a conversation that happened at 3 or 4 in the morning my time. Things that I always would have missed in the US, but are really amazing rooms with communities of, you know, people that are now my friends from when I am awake. And I don't have to miss out on that. It's really wonderful. So removing time zones as a problem is a big thing, I think. There's a couple of bigger picture things which I just wanted to highlight. So one of them, and this will be true of spaces, I think we touched on this last week, but because there's now an archive that exists, what it means is that over the next few months, Clubhouse will be building up an archive of replay rooms. And of course, what they're going to start to do is recommend those rooms in the hallway. So you'll see discovery really improve for the rooms. And they'll be able to highlight, the best rooms for your kind of audience or your interests. So that's going to be great as someone who opens the app and is looking for something immediately. But it will also be really great for the creators who make very good replays, because those are going to be highlighted and are going to get, many more listeners after they end than when they were live. So you can think of, a successful replay is taking the live audience you had and multiplying it by a factor. So that's going to be very interesting to see how that affects the dynamics of social audio on here and on Clubhouse. The last one, which I haven't seen that many people talk about, but this is something that the Clubhouse team put together from inception to shipping it in just over 4 weeks. And it's a huge project. But what this means is the Clubhouse team is now assembled and is functioning together as a team that can ship features like replay once a month. So the speed of them being able to develop new features and release them is really increased. So that makes me very excited about what will come up in the next few months.
You mentioned there, as we were talking about how you might be able to hide from a room, though. Is there something in that? What was that?
This is for replay only. It's not for a live room. But if you go and listen to a replay and you weren't part of the live room, you'll appear in the audience in the I listen to it as a replay section. But if you don't want to be seen there, what you can do is tap on your profile and hide yourself. There's some nuance here. What you're doing is you're hiding yourself from anyone else who comes along as a listener. What I believe you're not hiding yourself from is the creator. So the creator is in control type thing. The creator always sees who has listened to their space. So there's no anonymity in that sense. And they feel like this is important because the creator should be in control of whether, they want to know who's come through, basically. But it does mean you can hide yourself if you don't want anyone else on the platform to know that you've been in and listened to that replay. There are some other kind of privacy-orientated details like this, which are... So the other thing that hasn't really been mentioned is this isn't just if you create a room, then that room exists as a replay on your club page or your profile. It also means that if you speak in any room, it will appear on your profile. So, a space's equivalent would be, I'm speaking in this space now, but it's not my space. But the replay of this space would live on my profile. And I'm able to remove that if I want, but by default, that's where it goes. So that's really interesting. It means that quite soon, if you go to anyone's profile on Clubhouse, you'll be able to see all the spaces that all the rooms that they've speaked in recently, which gives you a good flavor of the kind of person they are and what they're interested in. Then you can go and listen to them speak. So that's also really nice.
Fantastic.
That is interesting. Love your insights, Morgan.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us again, as you do on a pretty much weekly basis now. We're always very grateful to hear from you.
Just one more related to that space that Morgan said. I'm saying now there's also statistics in a loose sense on the rooms. So you can see the number of people in the room now, but also the number of people who've passed through the room and gone in and out. So that's sort of quite interesting, and especially when you're running a larger stage, you get that sort of relative number of the turnover of the room or whether it's attracting people. And then you get the extra number after, when you're looking at the recording, of the number of people who've come back and looked at that. So that's a limited sense, but it's sort of quite useful as a host. You can sort of watch the room without scrolling up and down to see people jumping in and out of the room.
Yeah, I'm always quite interested to see kind of when a room or a space peaks, and kind of try to work out, okay, well, how many people had the mic and who was speaking, what was the topic, those kind of things. I kind of love analysing it in that way after the fact. So yeah, that sounds like that'll appeal to my data analysis geek. So sounds great.
Just to say about that is this is also the first glimpse of Clubhouse building in analytics into the platform. And I know last week they sat down and had a team meeting about where to go with this. And so I would expect to see a big push on in-app analytics probably around December.
Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.